Hello again. Welcome to our channel Uncorked. My name is Roland Zimmerman and I'm here today to talk to you about how to decant a red wine. Stick around, we'll get right to it. One of the frequently asked questions we get is, which wines should I decant? Followed by, how do you actually do it? And then, of course, followed by, which of the wines are the best suited for using in a decanter? To answer some of those questions, we have some of our props here in front of us that we're going to be using today to demonstrate how to actually decant a red wine. Now, for those that are relatively new to wine, red wines are best suited to be decanted. Not all red wines, but the majority of red wines. There are some white wines that would benefit tremendously from decanting because the decanting allows air to get into the wine, which releases some of these volatile organic compounds, or VOCs as they're commonly known, and which is the part of the wine that provides the flavor, which is what we all enjoy. So I have a little treat for those of you that have previously watched our How to Preserve a Wine video. And as you can see here, I have our Cabernet Franc with a stopper in it. This has been stoppered and vacuum pumped as per my instructions from an earlier video for about 3 or 4 days now. And let's see if it worked correctly. That is a satisfying sound. You know your wine was protected during that time. So, moving right along, in terms of my other props here, I have with me here a mesh. Now, for those of you that have never seen a decanter, or for that matter, a mesh of this particular size and shape, this is for wines that are much older. Generally speaking, those are red wines because they have a bit of sediment in them in the bottom of the bottle. This is a natural aging process, which we've covered in an earlier video. Once the wine ages, these sediments tend to fall to the bottom of the bottle, and therefore you don't really want to consume them because they tend to be very bitter, they tend to be very hard, and very unpleasant to your palate. Hence why this particular screen to screen out those hard particles. The next piece of equipment I have here, this is our aerator itself. Now, I don't know if you can see them, but in the bottom of this, there are a bunch of very, very small holes that'll become apparent once we start pouring wine through it. And what this does is it forces the wine out and opens it up to being aerated or into contact with air. This is important, again, for the development of the aromas, the VOCs that we really, really like in our wines. So, and of course, the final piece is our decanter. Now you may notice it has a very unique shape. It's not straight or flat, and this has a number of reasons. There are a couple of things you want to look for in a decanter that are very important. One of them is that it has a very large base. This is frustrating for some people that are new to decanting because the large base is very cumbersome and awkward to work with. However, it is very, very important for the wine. And as you can see, there's sort of a middle point to the decanter. This is about the level that you should fill the decanter to. Don't fill it up to about here, to about this level. And this is also the largest surface area of air to wine ratio that you can get, short of putting your wine, out on the table kind of scenario and making a big mess with it. Anyways, that is again important for the development of those aromas, because a lot of the aromas, what happens once they are aerated, they actually rest right in the top of the decanter, which is why it has this sort of tulip or funnel shape to it to prevent the beautiful aromas from escaping into the atmosphere and dissipating very quickly, which would leave you without the enjoyment. So, to the actual process. Now, as you can see here, I'm just simply pouring in, and you can kind of see the wine is running down. I'm not pouring very quickly, I'm actually pouring quite slowly. The slower you can pour the wine, the better it is for the wine. Now, unfortunately, we can't really offer you a smell version of this video, but the aromas wafting into this particular room right now are very, very strong aromas of berry fruits that are typical in our Cab Franc, and the lovely little bit of vanilla flavor as well. There. So we have decanted our red wine. And just 1 second here. Want to make sure we get the last drops. Okay. So the wine is now decanted. Now you have to be a bit patient, because although you have aerated it, what you've done now is you've opened the wine to air. Again, the explanation that you've allowed air into it, which has released some of the organic compounds that we perceive as lovely flavors. The longer it sits, the more these components get exposed to air, and therefore the more accessible the wine is to consuming. Usually we recommend for our reds to decant them about 15 to 20 minutes before serving. The other factor that most people don't realize why decanting is important is because of this large surface area, the wine actually warms up. And this is important if you've just gone to your basement or your wine fridge and you pulled out the bottle and you have a bunch of guests coming, or you're serving it relatively quickly. You can't exactly heat the wine in a pot before you serve it. So this is a good way to do it. Just let it rest for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then you can start serving. Of course, do be careful that once you pour, that you pour very carefully. Most people prefer to pour in this fashion. I personally like to use 2 hands because I have unfortunately had a decanter slip out of my hands and smash on the floor. Getting back to choice of decanter, again, it doesn't really matter. There is absolutely no difference between a crystal, a lead crystal, a glass, or a ceramic decanter. They all serve the same purpose, which is to provide the air into the wine as quickly as possible, to provide the enjoyment of the wine as quickly as possible. Getting to some of the wines that you should be decanting. In our assortment, we have a number of Cab Francs that definitely benefit it, as well as Pinot Noirs. Especially if they're a bit more of a full-bodied Pinot Noir, then you definitely want to decant it. It is, however, for Pinot Noirs, not recommended to decant them for as long as, say, a Cab Franc, which I was alluding to earlier, about 10 to 15 minutes. You might want to make it a lot shorter, maybe about 5 minutes to 6 minutes. And what that emphasizes, or what I'm trying to emphasize here, is once you've decanted it, you basically want to serve it to your guests. You want to try to empty the decanter as fast as possible, because the decanting process still continues as the wine sits here. The longer it sits, the more of those aromas actually dissipate and the flavor really gets lost very quickly. This is also what people often refer to as letting the wine breathe. We are currently letting the wine breathe. We have to address a little bit of an elephant in the room, and that is something which we've recently understood is a new trend, and that is putting wine in a blender to decant it. We're going to experiment with that. We'll get to that in a second, but in my own personal experience, I would not recommend this unless you're trying to sort of do a party trick. In part because when you do that, you're really forcing a lot of air very, very quickly into the wine, which is really great. Everything will smell lovely. Unfortunately, what you may be left with in the actual blender after the blending is something that has alcohol, water, and color, and not a lot of flavor. So again, we're going to experiment with that ourselves and see if we'd recommend that a little bit in just a little bit. Lastly, we're going to touch on something called hyper aeration as promised. And as you can see, I have this trusty blender here with us, as well as another bottle of Cab Franc. So this is new for me too. Good to the last drop, it is. Oh. Okay, so for safety's sake, we're going to put on the lid, and then we're going to give her a shot. Here it goes. Well, I don't know what to say. It's definitely aerated, I'll give you that. The smell is, well, the smell is quite nice, actually. I'm gonna have to try it now. This is actually quite intriguing. I'm really not sure what to get or expect out of this. I can definitely say that the wine is aerated. I'll absolutely agree with this, but and surprisingly, it still actually tastes rather decent. From a traditional standpoint, this is unusual. I can't say yes or no to this. I think your guests might be a little curious as to why you're pulling out the blender and pouring a bottle of red wine in it, but then again, it could be a nice party trick. I'm undecided as to whether or not this is an ideal way to aerate wine. I'm not going to lie. It worked. I can't say it didn't. It goes against my grain to say go ahead and do it. But if you want, by all means, it's worth trying, and who knows, try them side by side, the blender and the regular decanter, to see which one you prefer. Thanks for watching. Remember to drop a like. Please subscribe and give us any comments about it. We're very curious to hear what you guys have to say. Thanks for watching. See you again next time.